Ben Garwood, big thanks for agreeing to do the SMC Tribe podcast, and welcome to HR4K.
Hey, thanks, mate.
Thanks for having us here, mate. Obviously, we've been here a few times, done a few different events. Probably the coolest bar you could count.
Bar / coffee shop
/ making up as we go along.
Yeah, this must be the dream for any military veteran. If they wanted a bar, this is what they want it to look like generally. We've got like an Aldi version of this bar.
Yeah, you have.
You
got good, mate.
No, but mate, we normally sort of start these things off with like a few things. I think we think we know about you. Hopefully, tell us if we're wrong. Born in Cornwall.
Yeah.
Got that one in early. Paratrooper.
Yeah.
Engineer as well.
Remy, yeah.
Remy. Pathfinder.
Yeah.
Special Forces.
Yeah.
Been in the business world now about 10 years.
Yeah, just short 10 years, yeah.
Kind of, very much an entrepreneur, kind of incredibly creative, kind of various different ventures going, massively passionate about the veterans community and, well, big on the community thing, I suppose that's incredibly driven and passionate about what you do. And I suppose if the main driver of business is about making money, I don't think that's probably your driver. Is
no, I'm not doing that very well, am I?
Making change, but no, mate. It's,
one day, mate.
Yeah, mate. Obviously, loads of stuff for us to talk about. Yeah, kind of. Actually, for me, mate, one of the things I generally really I've heard it so many times over the years, but obviously, both us being ex-Marines, when you're in the Marines, you only really know, you don't think anything else exists, but. I don't really know that much about Pathfinders, mate. So that'd be one area I want to speak to, and
I think they actually tried to open it up to bootnecks.
Yeah, I think it has.
And but I got told that the Corps didn't let the guys go, or
because of BPT.
Yeah, I think so. And no, I think it was actually probably some of the good guys who were going forward. You had the operations. We were still quite in the mix of Afghan at the time, so I think it might have been one of the reasons. But it would have been a real shame because I think actually up the road here, the strength that we find with some of our friends, mutual friends who are bootnecks, and getting those guys out of that Royal Marine circle and then into the army, you bring a real different outlook and skill set into it. And I think that strength, in one of the few times that our strength is diversity, that is actually one of the cases where it actually works, you know what I mean? I didn't know if Royal Marines is a DEI hire. Probably is, maybe, I don't know.
Don't know.
But I think it would have been, we worked actually with, when I was in PF, we worked with your recce troop, and actually a couple of those guys I went on selection with later, and actually really good fun. Again, it was good for us because I think sometimes you can be the proverbial self-licking lollipop if you only work with the same people. So actually getting other people to come in with good ideas has worked out quite well for us.
We'll come to that because it'd be good to start your journey off, not from the day you're born, mate, but just what sort of shaped your...
First para as well? First para we've had on podcast?
Might be. Trying to think. No, Pete Klein as well.
Oh, he's just...
Oh, so there's another one who's actually articulate as well.
Had a few.
I didn't want to make that joke.
Yeah, well, that was it. I think that's why I went Remy for a bit and then came back.
No, good, mate. Because you obviously had a military family.
Yeah, both my grandfathers. So one of my grandfathers in the army. The other one actually wasn't in the army. Actually, is one of which we often forget. There was a lot of people. Certainly, as we're here at sort of Remembrance, we forget there was a lot of people who didn't actually deploy, and they were part of the big infrastructure. And my dad's side of the family, he was a coach painter, so he was involved in a lot of the production of things back here. My other grandfather, he was actually Ulster Rifles and the 5th Airborne Brigade, landing the gliders in Normandy and stuff like that as well. So quite a bit of a mix. My old man joined a bit late. He joined the Med Corps, and he came from a medic background, so he joined the Med Corps and then went 23 PFA, which is like our airborne medics. Brother was in the army. Older brother was in the army. In fact, my middle brother's just finishing off as a half colonel now in the army. They all went Med Corps. And then I didn't. I went to join the Reg, didn't I?
Military schooling as well, as I found out today.
Yeah, I just telling you today, I just got back from a reunion, and the similarities of going back to these reunions at school and what people have gone on to do and how you felt looking back at that institution is very, very similar to, obviously, our service. And I was saying to you there that actually that realization when you leave those gates, knowing that you're not the first and you're not going to be the last. And I think it's actually when we actually think about it that really, as I said, is your service is the memories and the people the friends you took away from that, rather than the bricks and the mortar that you were in. Yeah.
Did many of them join the military?
Quite a few. The school, like any school, I think often focuses on a lot of the officers that joined from there. But I think predominantly most people probably went into the ORs. Because the education system, it does promote guys going into the officer class. But, you can still get a great education without actually going through the whole education piece of sixth form. A lot of us go and join the army from ORs. And I think some of us, as we know, certainly from our backgrounds and where we recruit from, is some of us need to grow a bit more. We need to experience life in different ways rather than staying in the education system, college, university, and so on. Some of us need to go and be little shits for a little while and float around, then join the military and get structure, routine, and responsibility from there. And I think that was certainly for me and a few of my mates. But I actually, I've said it previously, I actually went to join the Marines first.
Yeah, mate, you did tell me that.
And they told me I was too small. Yeah, I think it was just some Navy officer that couldn't be asked doing the paperwork.
It was a height thing at one time, and it changed, didn't it? There was like a height
thing.
Not that you're that short, mate, but yeah.
Is it? I don't think so.
There was because it wouldn't be able to reach the ropes on the Tarzan.
So I went in. I went to military school, as I said, great school, really, really good school, and it was designed. It's called Duke York's Royal Military School, and it was designed for lots of bootneck kids there as well. And it was designed so where our parents were moving around a lot, it was a structure and it was cheap as chips. I mean, back in the 90s, it was like 500 quid a term. It was ridiculous.
And you're getting like a private school education.
Yeah. Much. And you get all the sports and everything else. And obviously that's massively subsidized. I think my dad was an OR when I was going, but I was at school with like the Farrah Hockley's kids, who were like, bosses of the army. And, it was classless, and I think a lot of us were united by our parents' service as opposed to, class and privilege, you know what I mean? So we all had like quite a ground in pads brads, essentially.
You enjoyed your time there then?
It was mega, mate. Yeah, it was really good, and it really sort of develops you from sports and making friends and building up all those social nuances of where you sit in society, fucking around, fighting, what you guys do with jiu-jitsu, all of these things are important to develop us as humans. And we struggle that with certain schools now where they don't encourage like kids just fucking around and fighting. We don't encourage sport as much as we do. And I'm not saying bullying, but I think there is a certain amount of education. Or as we said in the reducation, as a little bit later on. But when I was at school, my best mate at school was a guy called Ian Clark, and he said he was going to join the Paras, and I said, right, I'll join the Marines. And then when we left school, we went to the recruiting office and did the old chin-ups and stuff, and he was like, I'm sorry, son. I just don't think you're gonna get through it. And it's a real shame because I did everything that I had to do. And then I just became a bit of a scrote for a couple of years. A good scrote though. You still the festival scene and all the stuff you do as a teenage civvy, if you like. And then I think it was time for me when I needed to join the military after that. So I went from this sort of grunge, Kurt Cobain looking thing to grade 3 reg bloke.
What year was that, mate? What year did you join?
97. 97. So I left school in 94, 95, and then just sort of dossed around a bit. And I think, without sounding cheesy, I think you do need to find yourself, and you got to grow at your pace.
I assume you had some mates from school that were already in the military by that point. Then, if you'd had.
Ian was. Yeah. Ian was. So, and he was based in Aldershot, and I was living in Aldershot, working at Tesco's or for scaffolding companies or whatever it is, you just finding a bit of work. So I'd always bump into him. We stayed friends and just as he was leaving. He only did about 3 years. Just as he was leaving, I then joined. But yeah, you know, I think this is the great thing about the military is one thing always pissed me off when you look at these adverts about, well, we appreciate the diversity, we appreciate your insecurities, all these crappy adverts we saw. Do you remember that? Yeah. Where actually the best advert was like, where's Frank, right? Frank was me. Frank was a bit lost, didn't really know what he's doing, kind of getting away with it because I didn't really have any responsibility. And then I joined the military, put some money in my pocket, gave me a trade of some sort, gave me worth, which is more important than most things. And then I'm now around the world spending money and doing everything that you see in the Frank video, you know, things. That's where we probably should be looking at for recruiting, because we're saying to kids, look, you may not have got the classic education, you may not have got what you wanted, or maybe we need to get you out of that shithole or a change of scene. Go be Frank, you know, go join, go get some life experience, 3 years, 10 years, 23 years, whatever, you know. So yeah, I joined the Reg. It was quite quiet at the time. It was the sort of late 90s. Nothing was really happening. And I think my personality always likes change. I mean, that's what the great thing of, I finally realized by creating HR4K, I can always move things around. And if I need some sort of change in my life, I can always move things around. I got a couple of good constants. I got a great wife and great kids and everything else, but I like to be able to variety and create. But so I looked around the brigade and the guys who seem to be having all the fun were the guys in the cause, you know, like the REME and that, they're off doing adventure training, they're off having drinking. And I think at that age, you want to enjoy the best of the military, which is going out with your mates, getting on the lash, you know, just doing some fun stuff. And because we weren't necessarily operationally focused at the time, there was a lot of dicking around. There's a lot of bullshit and everything else. But I think the Reg, starting off in the Reg, put me in a really good set for later on. I joined the REME, did 2 years there, and I honestly met my best mates there. They were amazing people, all airborne trained. So they had a really good ethos. A lot of them came from commando brigades as well. So you had a really good mindset of guys. And then I think what I needed then was I needed responsibility after that. So after about, 3 to 5 years of dossing around in the army, I needed responsibility. And as you know, responsibility often craves more responsibility. So I transferred back and I started getting made up quite quickly. I was a multiple commander as a Tom, a section commander as a Tom going Lance Jack. But what I missed, and I think you guys would agree, was having a seat at the table. You get to a point in your life where, actually, I've got some ideas here. I think I've got a better way of skinning this, or at least I want people to hear my version of skinning it. And I think that also comes into your creativity. You see it with what you guys do, that creativity and worth and being recognized for your creativity. And there's only a small window you can do that in the military before eventually you're getting posted and promoted because you're available. And so I went back to the Reg. It was great. But then when I realized that I'm at the mercy of either a good or incompetent officer or a strong or weak subservient sergeant, and the same thing for an OC and a sergeant major. And as you know, it always flick-flacks. I was like, I need something else. And that's where Pathfinders, and I always encourage people to do it, that's where you're now getting treated as a grown-up. You know, you're now in the operational strategic planning phases where your actions and your reporting has direct effect at a high level.
So what is the role of Pathfinders, so we know, but for the audience, just to...
So Pathfinders is the lead reconnaissance unit within 16 Air Assault Brigade.
Would they lead that for the army as well then, as a whole?
Potentially, yeah. So what they do is they have the ability to force project using a number of different assets, obviously primarily from an airborne brigade. That would be from Halo, Hey-Ho. But essentially what they are is a a small teams unit, which makes them more adaptable. When we went into the Afghan phases, what we saw, and you would have seen it, is we were then forced into a certain amount of numbers would go into certain jobs. So we were told that we had to increase our numbers because that's what the last unit did, which is bullshit. The strength of Pathfinders, as for your recce, is the fact that you've got small independent teams with great skill sets that you can go off and then find, prove, whatever it is you've been asked to do on the ground. I think, as I said, having responsibility creates more responsibility. Having that opportunity to make a direct effect, and knowing that your intelligence is going to change the battle picture, that's fucking epic. Yeah. You know, that's amazing. That then brings you on to a place where, as I said, responsibility creates more responsibility, but intelligence craves more intelligence. So you then want to know what goes on behind the curtain. You then want to know, why are we here? What is the actual larger strategic plan? What is the exit strategy? What are the bigger pictures? I remember doing my Lance Jacks course, which I did with like the guards and loads of others. And it was quite frustrating because I had guards, colour sergeants teaching me as a paratrooper how I should soldier. Now, no disrespect to the guards. They soldier as guardsmen. Royal Marines soldiers, Royal Marines. Paratroopers, soldiers, paratroopers. We are shock troops. And the same as juniors and seniors. There are some fundamental basics that can transcend, but ultimately you should be trained by the units for those roles that you're being trained for. And I remember this colour sergeant said, right, Garwood, what assets are available to you as a section commander? And I was like, okay, so I've got GPMG, Minimi, obviously rifleman. And he was like, yeah. And then I was like, then I've got MFCs from mortars. I've got 7RHA. I've got fast air. And he was like, right, I'll stop you there. Actually, what you have? And I said, well, not where I come from. Where I come from as a section commander, I've got everything fucking available to me. And so I should. And to restrict me to believing that all I have is a small fucking train set to play with restricts the ability for a commander on the ground to understand the big about what's available for the estimate process. So where I teach now, which we can talk about in a bit, where I teach now and what I taught when I was in is we should always be thinking up from where we are so we understand how we can be better as soldiers. So when I was in PF, I was like, I want more of this. And the natural place to go is selection. You know, being privy to that
PF, mate, just before we go on to the selection, what's selection like for getting into PF? It's not that straightforward.
No, it's not, yeah.
No.
I mean,
actually, you have to put in that you want to do it first, and then
so I actually I went on selection, but I wasn't. I think there was everyone's bodies are different, and when I went through P Company, I was naturally fit. I played a lot of rugby, and I, as you know, P Company and Commander courses are very different courses. I speak to paratroopers, and they would often agree that Commando course is a better course. Because what it does, certainly from the all arms point of view, you're creating an identity across everyone under that cap badge, and also you're giving them soldiering skills. Where P Company, we're learning how to soldier in depot if you're a paratrooper, but if you're in all arms, the only thing you got was that buck sheet bit of soldiering you did in depot, and then you do a fitness course. P Company I got away with because I was fit. And then Pathfinders was a different kettle, and so was selection was a different kettle, because what you need is endurance and that time on your legs. And I think that often comes with age. You're still going to get guys who are fit enough to get in, but actually what you need for those courses is that real natural grit, determination, and keep going when it's fucking hard. And that isn't being a racing snake. You know, that's a mindset thing. That's a body thing. So I went on selection. I wasn't successful. I was out in the States. So I needed to rechange the way I train. So I applied for PF and I started looking at time on the legs. So I started looking at, I would swim more. I would run slower, but for longer. I would cycle for, slow and long, but nice, decent hills. And the idea was less impact on my knees, but a lot of endurance type sort of training, yeah. Because we know how to run with a fucking Bergen on our back because that's what we're good at. So you don't need to train with weight. You just got to train your body for time on legs. So we were going on PF is a fucking shock factor because not only are you doing the same sort of hills as you do on selection at the same pace, but you're also doing a lot of runaways. So the whole idea with PF is kit on and get to target quick. So when you got tabbing and then you do what PF does, which is they're like runaways. It's horrendous. And it's a cheeky course because it's very compact. So you do the hills phase. You obviously get some lessons in there with navigation. And then you have your test phase on the hills phase, as well as the thrashings and the ranges in between. And then after you finish that and you do endurance, you're straight onto the ranges. It's very consolidated course.
Big onus on the soldiering skills as well.
A lot of on the soldiering skills, a lot of on your OP skills and everything else. Now, like anything, it assumes you've got a good base level of soldiering when you turn up to it. And that will be really apparent because now when you start working in OPs, as you're aware, or small teams, there's no place to hide. You can't be a jack cunt. You know, there's a lot of kit to carry, as you know, from all your kit and equipment. You're very self-sufficient in that. And I think it's a great way of determining the men from the boys in that regard, you know.
I was assuming that you need to be like the selection process to even get onto PF. They're already looking at you, and if you're going to be, you know, like a potential Marine course or something, they're having a look at you first. Not anyone can just go, oh, I want to go and go on that, can they? Or
so it is open to everyone,
right?
I believe. We went before my intake. We actually had a really good intake, but before my intake, it was very power edge heavy. My intake, we were going through a very weird phase within brigade where, because we were very operational, a lot of guys weren't putting themselves forward for things like recce platoons, pathfinders, or even selection, because they were getting enough operational output from what they were doing. Before, these units were really popular because it was one of the few places where you actually got some really good ops or whatever. So what we actually saw was a lot more attached arms were coming on the Pathfinder course than Power Edge guys. So there is some good things with that and there's some bad things with that. The good thing is actually, again, the diversity of knowledge and skill sets. And I would argue probably the best soldier we had in my tenure in PF was a Remy bloke, a guy called Scotty Patterson. Phenomenal soldier. Hands down the best soldier that we had. So I don't necessarily see it's from background. But there's also a certain amount of humility that when you're delivering reconnaissance, you're not better than Power Edge. You're providing a service to Power Edge. And you have to be good because they're all going to be looking at you. They're all going to be waiting for you to trip up and, you know, cutting around in your alley shit. You know, they want you to fail. You know what I mean? So you have to be good. And you have to. So that was something that was a bit of an education piece for some of the attached arms. Say, look, you've done great. You're now in the infantry world here doing reconnaissance. You're not better than them. You're here to support them, you know, and but yeah, it is open to everyone.
All I know about Pathfinders, mate, is you get all the Gucci courses once you've done it. And
yeah.
It's just course after course. And
yeah, there's quite a few. I mean, we were lucky. We got a lot of things like DEMS courses, your Halo courses, your Hey-Ho courses, some good med courses. I think that's got a lot better now. You know, if you remember back in those days, there were some good courses, but it was very templated, wasn't it? I mean, the Alias course back in the day was like a LERPS course, wasn't it? Do you know what I mean? It was... We do a small bit of interrogation on the course, and then some guys will go away and go and do like the LURPS interrogation. I think for anyone in the army who wants to is probably either needs a break or wants something a bit more fulfilling, then I think Pathfinders is a really good place to go.
Good prep to then go on selection as well, and as a career.
It's interesting
step.
because actually we worked it out. I think we deliver something like a troop size of blokes every 2 to 3 years into the regiment. So the numbers from Pathfinders is really high, but that's because the mindset is a very similar mindset. You know, we are a surveillance reconnaissance, which is the fundamental skill of the regiment, type of soldier. We love good, solid base soldiering as well. And as I said, we crave that need for intelligence and to understand why, you know. So I think it is a natural progression for many, but not necessarily seen as a must. You know what I mean? But yeah, it's I'm really glad it's one of those things as well. It's like I'm glad I did it. I actually did it, as I said, because I couldn't get back on selection at the time, and I needed to be treated like an adult. I needed not being fucked around. I needed not waiting for the next Rupert to turn up and change the rules and the plans, and having to do what someone who's got 6 months experience is telling me to do when I've got 10 years. You know.
How long did you do before you then went on to selection?
Half my career was in the regular army, and then the other half was
So working on a timeline, you must be pretty old by the time you.
I was 33 when I went on selection,
which is pretty cheeky.
Yeah.
On the body.
I mean, as you're aware, I fucking hurt myself when I got in. I put my femur through my leg, so I got quite badly injured when I got in. But I was really well looked after because of my Pathfinder experience. I'd already done my Halo, hey-ho, we'd done my OP phase. So actually, they were pretty cool with me. But it definitely gave me some really good fundamentals going in there. You know, gave me definitely a bit of a step up to understand how things work. You know what I mean?
How did you find selection?
Well, I did the same training as I did for PF.
Yeah,
I did the same thing. I did the same routines, same everything. I realised actually that's what my body needs. That's how I need to train. And obviously, I'm 48 now. My body has certainly changed, but my body always welcomed and received well a good thrashing, because that's what I was accustomed to, as you were from the bottom field or the, you know what I mean, whatever is that field by the tunnel.
You don't have to enjoy it, mate, but you
No, but you know what I mean is it works for you. Do you know what I mean? That's what's good for us. Yeah. And actually, it's interesting because now you've got functional fitness and everything else, which is just a fucking thrashing, isn't it?
Do you know what I mean? When CrossFit become a thing.
It's like
just like military PT, mate.
Yeah. So you basically monetizing the bottom field. For Royal.
When I drove down last night, Dave was asking a few questions about different physical tests in the military. I was like, I can't imagine doing those things now. Like, obviously, physically couldn't do them now anyway, but as in just the thought and the mindset to pull off some of the crazy things you can put your body through.
Well, I was talking to a mate of mine on the weekend, and he's never been in the military. He works for a drinks like recruitment company. And I've got another mate of mine who's into like sort of property development, project managing type role. And they've never done what we've done. But as humans, I feel that we often need to challenge ourselves in certain ways. And I think it's something that we need to do. And we see it with guys go and do Marathon des Sables. We see people doing Tough Mudder. We see people doing Spartan races, all these, or whatever these fucking mental things that people do. We often don't appreciate, and that classic civvies would pay fucking thousands to do this and everything else. And no doubt they would, right? But we did that as a part of a course to get what we needed to achieve, or it was the fitness levels that we were being asked to do. For guys who who aren't as fortunate to have that in their lives, there is still a void where they still want to be able to push themselves and see how well they do. And it comes down to the fundamentals of being human, where we hunted, where we gathered, where we had to push ourselves because of changes in landscape, climate, or war. You know, all of these things are ingrained into us to do that. And if we don't if we don't get that fulfillment,
Yeah, body's craving it.
we'll go and look for it somewhere else, you know. And obviously for us lot, that happened to us, so we don't get overly excited. There are some still perverts that even at our age are still pushing themselves.
High Roxers.
Yeah, and they love it.
Off.
Yes, yeah. But I think it's just one of these things that's ingrained into us, and that's again is where we often see commonality with civilians. That often probably we have more commonality with civilians than we do with some of the people we served, based on mindset, maybe, you know. Good play. I mean, I only did a few years because of my age. They screwed the nut for me and they said, look, normally you do 3 years here, but we'll let you do 2. Or they were sick of me and they wanted me to go. I don't know. But,
When did you carve out this sort of jungle expertise, mate? Because I know you're still involved in that a little bit now.
that was out of a couple of reasons. That was out of necessity because I was skint. And also, I think change, you know. I love what we do here. This is amazing. And I was helping a friend of mine out and he said, look, I've been asked to teach some specialist units jungle warfare. The next future soldiers of an organisation, jungle warfare. I said, I'll help you out, see if I can find you some instructors. Things were a bit tight at the time. You know, we had gone through a number of changes here. Some opportunities weren't that successful. So I was like, I'll do it. I jumped on it and I forgot how teaching can make you feel, that privilege of you know, giving people your knowledge and that experience, you know. And the jungle is a great place to be able to teach because it's a leveler. Yeah. You know, we got it on a T-shirt here. Jungle is neutral, you know. Yeah. And I think when you look at the jungle, and when we look at soldiering, as I've said earlier, I don't look at it from the base layer or the baseline of what's expected to operate there. I always look at these places as transit corridors or operational theatres. So when we teach, I like people to think about why you're there. What is it you need to achieve? What is your 2, 3 up commanders want of you? So when we look at the jungle, we look at the canopy of the jungle and how we operate, and we go through these really basic skills they're life-saving skills. So your routine drills, patrolling, covering your sign, tracking, first sign, your LUPs and all these other bits and pieces, and navigation. These are all basics. That's walking in the park. That should be a given. What we actually need to be looking at is how do assets work within the canopy? What are your limitations? What are your considerations of working in this environment? Can I bring assets in? Can I work with an asset? What if I'm not actually going on the ground and I need to bring in a local or an agent? How would I get them to navigate? How would I get them to do what I need to do? If there's an actionable, if there's something actionable on target, how can I achieve that? You know, can I bring mortars in? Can I bring fires in? How do I even get into the country from the first place? This is what's the third party awareness, as you know from what you guys do? What's the third party awareness of me being a white guy going into this country? How do I bring weapon systems in? How do I get fed? How do I get CASEVAC? And all of these things is what we should really be teaching. Yeah. The other stuff is, but I think when we look at military courses, because the other things are actuals that we can hold people accountable for grading, we focus more on, did you scratch the floor to make sure you've covered your sign? Yeah. Then we actually looked at, what did you achieve and can you achieve it?
And it's always been done the same way, innit, for years and years and years. And, It's
That's the reason why it's on selection. It's a tough place to operate, regardless,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah, so you have, as you know, because you guys teach, is you have the classic, there are some people who can just teach. They can't necessarily do, and that turns into a culture. So what you end up having is a creeping excellence of teaching teaching things rather than actually looking at, right, okay, this is the reason why you're here, guys. And you remember your best instructors were like, right, this is cool, but guys, think about this, think about that, that sort of stuff. So I did 3 of these, various different units, various different levels of abilities and skill sets and competence, as we know. But the privilege was unbelievable,
So we're obviously looking back from the older Ben's perspective, of how you remember that sort of time. But I might be completely wrong here, but you sound like a bit like the bloke who's almost too clever or thinking outside the box of like questioning, why are we doing it this way? Why can't we do it this way? Where that's not always it's probably different now, obviously, but a lot of time that's sort of looked upon as a negative with, kind of like, look at this bloke, you're thinking outside the box on his own, where
so
they don't want free thinkers.
So I've got a theory on this. So the whole of the MOD is, the army originally was structured because it was run by class, yeah? So the whole point of class, so your lords and everyone else, your landowners, had to find a way of getting their peasants to fight on their behalf for their own interests. So you had society, which was class, which was your dignitaries and everyone else, and then you had your peasants. There's a difference between what we're seeing now, where you've got class, which was what the officer class turned into, and then the ORs. So essentially what these laws did is they realized that people like us were never going to have class, or they didn't want us to have class. So instead they gave us responsibility. And the way that the army is structured so process is what wins battles. Through attrition and numbers is how you win battles. If you follow the process, eventually you'll win as long as you have the numbers on the battlefield or the ability to run that on the battlefield. So part of that process is having people who do exactly as they're told when they're told to do it. Now, if you think you've got to get this peasant or this young lad from who's 16, 17, you're going to teach them how to develop into a basic soldier. Yeah, and at some point, you're going to say, right, okay, you're doing really well, and then I'm going to give you, instead of class, I'm going to give you worth and responsibility. So you're now in charge of those 2 soldiers. Oh, I've got something. I'm someone. And so it's a false thing that the class system's given you to make you feel you have worth, which ultimately is still a job, but now makes you feel that you have a place to be. Then they give you a mess, your own dining mess. It's not the officer's mess. That's a different fucking place. You've got your own mess. You've got your own tables. You've got uniforms. You've got all these sort of things, and it goes on like that. So obviously, this day and age, we don't have a class systems like we used to have. You see officers now at Sandhurst who are stagging on gates where you got some Arab that's just paid him to stag on a gate for him. Yeah. It's not the days where these officers, literally as the term paid your commission, were given a rank because they're a lord or they paid for that thing. So the whole process is set up that you follow these rules and you be a good soldier and do as you're told. As I said earlier, you then have this Rupert that's literally just turned up to your unit, got 6 months experience, but now he's in charge of a bunch of soldiers that have got God knows how many years of experience between them. But yet you're still doing as you're told by the one with class, yeah? And that's been enforced by the sergeant who's got responsibility. Yep. Now, the difference between elite and special forces is elite special forces, and the regular military is that they are process driven, where we are mission driven. So for us, we are essentially, you get given a mission as a commando unit or as a special forces unit, and then your focus is on that. I don't give a shit how you do it, and you will use unconventional means, but you will use unconventional means to achieve that goal because you are a reactive force to the problem that you've been given. The big army is a process-driven force. That will get there at the time it takes for that military unit to get to that thing, you know? So that's where the difference is. And when you're in that very green role, you do have to shut the fuck up and do as you're told. But I fear that over time, we're now seeing in special forces and elite forces, we're starting to see a bit more, for a better word, nepotism, where actually what we're seeing is people who employ the future staff sergeants, the future people in those positions, those subservient positions to themselves, that aren't going to rock the boat. Well, the problem with that is you don't have people that question the estimate, the COA. You need people to question the COA, and it's not out of being flippant or being disruptive. Now, back in the day when we were in our units, there was always, I think you used to call them the nod father, didn't you? Yeah. And it was the person who was a bit of a shit cunt, couldn't really get through the ranks, but because he's been in for so long, he's essentially assumed himself to be the senior Tom. He's probably not the senior Tom. He's senior Tom in time served, but they're always the ones that would always question the Rupert and always question people, make them look stupid, because actually what they're doing is hiding their own incompetence, right? That's not what we're saying. Those people are assholes. It's good to have people that question the plan because ultimately they want the best plan to succeed at the end. So in a reactive and a mission-focused organization, it's a privilege to be able to have a seat at that table and have your ideas listened to. And if you're lucky enough that your idea gets seen through to fruition and it's a success, how fucking epic is that? You know, how, again, go back to the word I've used a lot, worth, you know, gives you reason, you know? But I fear that the way we are with things like DEI and wokeness and all these other issues we're having now, we're actually not necessarily getting the best people for the right jobs. We're sometimes putting people in because we're posting them, promoting them, or worst case, we're putting people in because they're not going to rock the boat for you, which ultimately means that we're not going to get the best results at the end.
Same business, isn't it? You need to have people challenging you and challenging the ideas, or you just don't progress.
100%.
Like,
you know
just holds everything back. Yeah. We always disagree.
Well, this is probably why you probably work well, because actually, although you've got the same direction of travel, the same output you want to achieve, you might have different ways of getting there, or different ideas.
100%, man. Yeah. So we, like, you know, Dunk says black, I'll say white. Sometimes I purposely say black. Hopefully he'll say white then.
Yeah,
that's what I want to
Thinks he's trying to play him, but, it doesn't work.
Yeah, but yeah, whatever reason it does. I suppose a comparison you could say would be maybe like the army's a bit like kind of like a public sector organisation, sort of slow moving, kind of bound by that sort of structure where and sort of the elite sort of special forces are kind of mission driven, product driven, kind of like a private company, you know, different compared between a private company and a public company sort of thing.
So the flexibility is
flexibility comes with size as well, being smaller and agile. But
nothing else matters, does it? And it will achieve, and you can't really have wokeness or DEI in. Maybe you can have it in.
It's starting to creep in everywhere, or maybe we get it. The only problem that I have with this, and I've raised it loads of times, is that we don't, in those organisations, we don't have long-term strategic planning for what we want to achieve as an organisation. Yeah, because we're often reactive and subservient to FCO, MI6, whatever the requirement is, and because of the classic civil service 2-year rotation and posting, there isn't anyone in these jobs long-term enough to see it through. Now, the big military really, does that role really change? No, his last sergeant major gets the brief off the other sergeant major. Is he really changing the world? Not really. only small nuances of how he treats his men and what they need to achieve. But really, all he's doing is still taking the same process and following that through, where actually it doesn't necessarily need to overly evolve or quickly evolve. It can evolve over a slower period of time, where special forces and elite forces, they do need to evolve because technology changes, because they are reactive. When you look at, Israel, China, Russia, a lot of these are really long-term planning for how their country looks like. And that includes the way they look at their foreign policies. We don't do that. We don't do that because the way our government's structured. We don't do that the way our civil service is structured. We don't do that because of the lack of accountability in our civil service. And that the knock-on effect eventually comes down to us, and that's quite problematic. When you break it down, ultimately, you can only deal with what you've got, which is you. And I think when you realize that actually you're only being posted and promoted because you're available, when you realize that actually jobs need filling, and if you look back at the person who took your last job, they certainly weren't the best guy for that job. And then you look ahead of you and you think, why the hell is that person in that job? And you realize that actually you're now at a point in your career that you're not necessarily mission focused. You're no longer in the weeds and that. And your time on that table, having a seat at that table, is short-lived. For people like you and I, it's time to move on. That's why there's so many people leave the military as major in the officers, because actually they're like,
I'm done.
Yeah, I should be working at Deloitte, Morgan and Stanley, wherever they should be or whatever. And that's
because you fill in a billet. You mean as in just because it becomes a job and you just fill in a billet outside of that?
Now, I want to caveat that with actually there are people who've gone through their careers and they love it. They really enjoy those challenges. And actually they're getting a really good return on what they want in their lives. Okay, so I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying from me, they're getting a really good return on what they want in their lives. Or they could be the people that you and I know that work and home balance are two separate things. I go to work, I don't give a shit about work. I go to work, I do the job, and then I spend that downtime with my family and I use it for that. Where for us, work is life. We've created businesses that are also reflections of our own personalities. And what we're involved in.
That's a good point to start to talk about this place, mate, which is, it's evolved from your early days into where we are now, and I know you're going to keep, iterations, is that right?
Yeah.
Into different, it keeps evolving and changing shape. But when did you have the idea for HR4K? Is it? I know it's probably not exactly where you want it to be yet, but is it going in? It's obviously going in the right direction. Is this what you envisaged when you first came up with that?
So when I first got into business, I'm just a kit pest, ex-PF guy, and I was a kit pest. So I was at work and someone asked me if I would help design the new belt kit for work. So I got in touch with some friends of mine and we designed this belt kit that went to the training wing and did quite well. So then we're like, well, actually, why don't we turn it into a brand? And we then put it into a number of shops. The people behind what we were doing were very greedy, and they didn't really see the longevity of what we need to achieve as a brand, and they were just looking at quick wins. They also didn't really have the personalities and humilities to deal with people from the military. So actually the brand really, really struggled. I still wanted to do business, and I already used my networks to actually try and drive that. So I didn't really want to give up. I heard this thing the other day, and it said about running a business is like wanking in public. If people are watching you and they're waiting for you to get embarrassed and fail and give up. But if you keep going, they're going to get embarrassed. You know what I mean? So that's
might not use that one as my line, but
you know what I mean.
Makes sense.
Eventually, if you just, but So I wanted to keep going. I wanted to do something. I didn't want to give up on business. And I set up with one of the guys, and we set up HR4K. We just pulled the name out of our ass. We wanted a name that had some sort of links back to my heritage from Hereford, so HR4 being the postcode. And then the HR4K was an anagram of 4 kilometers an hour. So we wanted something that said the background, but without sort of saying it. You know what I mean?
It's good.
And I started off by basically just doing what we were already doing, which was buying all these American brands like Black Rifle Coffee, Rogue American Apparel, Zero Foxtrot, 30 Seconds Out, all these brands, Pipe Hitters Union. And this was shit that we all wore back in the day from like the GWAT days and stuff. And I spent a lot of time in the States with work, so I was bringing this stuff over, and that really gave us the monopoly in the UK. And it was in 2016, I think we really established ourselves as a brand that was bringing in these other products. So I was away actually, and we thought, well, we're competing online now with lots of other brands, and a lot of people are doing this sort of copycat type brands. I couldn't really come out publicly about who we are to give the brand a bit of substance, but I wanted to stand out from everyone else who had these sort of bedroom businesses online, T-shirt, coffee type stuff. So we went to bricks and mortar. We got this place. It's an old Second World War ammunition factory. It's got loads of history to it. It looks the part. It's got great real estate around it. And by building something that had a familiar vibe to all those bars we used to make on tour, wood, shitty old carpets, you know what I mean? Old furniture and stuff. And creating that, it gave us the ability to stand out a bit. And there is that American feel of that sense of escapism. You come in here, it doesn't look like work, doesn't look like home. And so I wanted to kind of create like the ultimate man cave, somewhere where, just you can forget about the shit that's going on. You can literally ride a motorbike through the door, get off your bike, come and grab a coffee. We started looking at the fizz side as well. The guy I was working with at the time, he's big into his CrossFit. So we tried doing what later became like the Rogue Invitationals, where we set up like a TV screen and we'd have some rigs. And the idea is we wanted to then compete against boxes that are in the States by broadening the brand, which is something that we talked about how, we like working together because it allows you to work outside of the 4 walls that you're in and expands yourself. So that didn't really work out well. And the reason why it didn't work out well is because at the time I could only afford what I could afford, and I didn't really necessarily have the talent of staff to drive it or have the same vision.
Are you still in at this point? When
Yes, still in, yeah. And then, but what I found was where I was sort of coming off this, I was like staff sergeant at the time, and I was going through that sort of cycle of realizing that I was being posted and promoted, or about to be posted and promoted, not necessarily because I was the best or the right person for the job. And I still crave that desire to create. And even if you look at going back slightly, SF operations, we work on the black economy most of the time. We do things that no one really wants us to talk about how we achieved the goal in the end state. And it's quite artistic. It's creative. You have to be creative. Hunting bad people, you have to be creative because these are clever people, and you don't have the assets. You don't have everything available. So actually, it gets to a point where, you're no longer doing that. And you have to find a void, fill that void that you've already got in you to be creative. And I thought this was something I could do. This was something that I could feel I could really just put my heart and soul into and make it a reflection of yourself, just as you would do back in work for your output. So I then tried working with a few other people to expand this in different locations, and for one reason or another, it didn't really work out, which was a real shame because that was at the part of lockdown was kicking in, and I just signed off to do it. So, I kind of left thinking I was going to go into a business that was expanding, and instead I left and was earning 500 quid a month. You know, I had this lockdown, no one was coming through the door, but I'm very lucky. I've got great missus, great people behind me, and we just had to endure it and just kind of get through. And obviously people like yourselves and everyone else. And what we found is by creating something that was quite wholesome, we found that we were able to build a community, and the community is people of a shared ethos, contribution, doing the right thing. And we embody that community through subculture, bikes, jiu-jitsu, MMA, rock music, beer, coffee, you know, the stuff that we like to do as men and women, you know. And so that's kind of, obviously we've got the tattoo shop here as well. So that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to build these sort of lifestyle business where everyone's welcome, as long as you're someone who actually has decent values and shared values of contribution and, you know, almost Christian values, you know, good, solid, you know, doing the right thing at the right time, you know. And that's kind of led us on to now working with bigger organizations who are interested in what we're doing, and how can we evolve those organizations and help them out. And I think the exciting thing about creating an interesting brand or an interesting place is the interesting people you meet along the way. And using those skill sets, those basic skill sets that we have from our service of being able to communicate with strangers, finding common ground, you find out what they're up to. And then when you speak to them what you're up to, opportunities come out of it, you know, and that's pretty cool, you know.
Yeah. So it's awesome, mate, what you built here. Wouldn't have to build
I don't think you probably appreciate, mate, how big and well known the brand is, to be honest. You know, when you're in it yourself, I don't think you see it sometimes of like.
But it's that community that supports the same as us with the, you know, alumni, the tribe. That's the bit that's more important. When you said about the bricks and mortar, this is big part of the brand identity, but it's actually that community you've built around it.
100%. Yeah, it, like seeing people wearing your brand or supporting your brand, cool, or asking to put your brand on stuff. I've got friends of mine recently saying, can I put your brand on our kids rugby team sponsor, you know, and just little things like that is like, you know, I've seen, and there's loads of amazing things that have happened here. We do some great things. You know, we set up Ground Hammer, the jiu-jitsu and the combat.
Say a bit about that, mate, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I will do. So that is also part of what we want to do here. So building the community and giving back, and making people feel like they're part of something. So rather than having a business where it's just going one way, what you want is a business where people can also contribute back into the business or feel like they're bringing something to the party. That always has to be caveat with making sure that if they are doing something, they are reciprocated. Not that necessarily they want reciprocation, but I think it's important that what we don't do is take advantage of that kindness. But you know, we had a poor bugger who's in a hospice at the moment. We hosted probably his last day out in here, which is amazing. We've had a couple of parents who came in and hosted a fundraiser for their child who's only 12 and passed away. We've done business and networking days of this stuff we've done with you. I've seen 2 people play pool. Another guy stayed on, played some other dude and offered him a job. I mean, that's awesome. Fucking epic. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And it's seeing those things that makes your heart swell. You know, people have met their other halves here. You know, there's all these magical things that happen within this space. And I think by creating places where good cunts come together, then ultimately good things are going to fall out of it. Going back to the fizz side, we always wanted to create a fizz space. And we always, as I said, we always struggled with it, I think, since Cookie left, to have quality PT instructors, people who got it, you know, the bigger picture. So when the new build opposite got built, I asked to have one of the buildings, and I thought what we'll do is we'll look at doing a jiu-jitsu and an MMA academy center with a functional fitness space, and that would help build the community as well. So what we could do is not only we could then help teach blue light services and military units unarmed combat, but we could also then work with the local community and build up that network. And it's proven we did that within 2 years. Well, as you know, within 2 years, we got up to about 400 members in 2 years.
Amazing.
We're doing some cool shit with social services. So a big thing we do during the day to help keep the lights on, we get kids in who've got shitty parents. And there's obviously an issue at the moment with a generation where parents have got a lack of accountability and dependency on state, and a lack of accountability and responsibility for their own children. So what's happening is these children will probably follow the same trait or be susceptible to antisocial behaviour or county line gangs. So what we look to do with the councils, we get the kids in during the day, we surround them by adult positive role models. We use jiu-jitsu, where, as you know better than I, for someone who does jiu-jitsu, is jiu-jitsu, again, gives you grading system. It gives you something to aspire to. It gives you an identity and a tribalism, which kids are lacking. It gives you structure, routine. It gives you discipline. And as humans, we need structure, routine, discipline. We need it. We need to feel safe. And if we don't have that safety, which these kids aren't getting at home, we'll find it somewhere else. So what we're trying to do is use Groundhammer as a brand to give kids an identity, to feel like they're part of something bigger than what they've got. Now, the way it works is the kids will come in through the social services. We'll put some of our guys as instructors who've also been through something similar, but come out at the end really well. We allow the kids to come into here halfway, so they can have a bit of a break. We'll probably see them tomorrow when we're in here. And it gives the social services a chance to separate some of the kids. And they've said to me about 95% of the kids who go to these schools are good kids. They've just got shitty parents.
Yeah, of course. Just
And
shaking.
there's some crazy shit that like breaks my heart as a dad, that some of these kids, they don't even have a toilet or a bathroom with a lock on. Do you know what I mean? At home. So you think of all those changes these kids are going through that we take for granted. Is something as simple as getting 2 minutes to go and have a toilet or a shower or whatever, and being spoken to, releasing endorphins and just playing and stuff, these things that we take for granted. And I think Groundhammer allows these kids to have that, And also it does, where I was going with that was, sometimes these kids may be disruptive, and that's really a result of the attention they're not necessarily getting at home. So they'll take it out on other kids or anything else. So the social services allows them to separate the kids and either bring the more boisterous ones into the gym, or leave the boisterous ones back with the teachers and bring the ones that are being overshadowed by the boisterous ones to get them in. And the results are amazing.
Brilliant concept, mate.
Honestly,
that's,
it's fucking great.
that's more community recognition as well, doing stuff like
Yeah,
that. I know you're not doing it for that reason, but
no,
people are going to see that. And
it's good because I think it's a similar situation that you've had. We've had some kickback early on from another gym that really didn't see outside of their own fucking four walls, and they believed they had the monopoly and everything else. But we're all about sharing the love and working with other people. And actually, sadly, what we've seen is all their members have come here. And we had a little bit of a pushback, and there was problems with planning and everything else. So doing these things, actually, the council, we've had Jesse Norman, the MP, we've had the Sheriff of Herefordshire, we've had local councillors, we've had A-list celebrities.
I saw that.
We've had these people supporting what we're doing, and it's making us look strong for all our planning and everything else that we need to do, and expansion.
Did that all get sorted, didn't it?
Yeah, it's in the process. We're golden. We're good.
Good, mate.
But actually, the guy that tried sinking us, he's sunk himself. Because if it actually just worked with us at the start, we could have all created a market and a place where everyone would have succeeded. We're hoping to run the social services program out in other towns. We're going to see what that looks like. We're definitely working. Obviously, I won't say the places we're doing this for the safety and security of the kids. But we are looking to do this in schools as well. So the idea is get some jiu-jitsu classes in schools, get the kids to release those endorphins, get them to run around. We do it with the rugby teams. So again, kids aren't scrapping as much as they used to do. So we get it in with the kids. The kids are doing jiu-jitsu. So now they're used to, rough and tumble stuff. And as kids grow at different size and different levels, they're more confident of tackling bigger kids because of using skills they've learned in jiu-jitsu. So I don't do jiu-jitsu. I do a bit of MMA and get filled in most of the time. But I absolutely see how fucking awesome it is, from a wellness perspective as well.
Did it take a while to get social services on board with it?
No. We actually, this was the frustrating thing is, as you know, I've been battling so many ideas within HR4K for years. We were talking about it earlier. And obviously you guys have seen this. I came up with this years ago with the same guys who work at social services, but I couldn't find the right staff here to actually get on with it. Yeah. Now, there are boxing clubs who do this. There are other organizations that do it. But what I wasn't interested in is accountability and consistency what I wasn't interested in is handing this project over to a local gym that just wants to keep the lights on, but what they're not doing is safeguarding the kids from the recruitment of county line dealers that might be in the gym as well. What I needed was consistency and accountability by delivering a project that social services can see the safeguarding and can see the results. So at the time, we were looking to try and do this, and as I said, we just couldn't get the right people behind it. And then finally, when Groundhammer opened, it was a success. The same social services guys did go to some other places to try and do it, and again, there were safeguarding issues because of that. Where actually, I think because we're not interested in just trying to keep the lights on, then actually we're more interested in the result than we are just taking the money off the council. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Great seeing that positive impact, mate. And then on the other hand, you've got the comics, mate. Are still a thing?
Yeah, so Groundhammer was a brand I created 2017, 2018. And it was a brand I wanted to give back to the regiment because the regiment looked after me when I got badly injured, and it looked after a lot of my friends. There was some of my friends that were killed, and it looked after their kids and everything else. So I wanted to do something. I wanted to create a brand that I could give back, right? And I thought the Regiment Association at the time was fucking amazing. Really looked after me, looked after my kid. My kid was born with some issues, and they put the money in my account the next day. Didn't even question anything. When Lloydie was killed, they looked after him and his family. They looked after his family and his kids. They were just epic. And I thought, how can I do something just to sort of give back or show them give back? So we created beer and drinks through Groundhammer. And the idea is to put proceeds back from that back into the association. Then as I was sort of looking at the brand, I was thinking, what if I could create a brand with a number of verticals that mutually support each other? Well, drinks is about social and, enjoying and unloading and kind of decompressing, etc. How can I draw attention to the good causes? Well, let's create comics where we tell the stories of real heroes and their actions, do it in a science fiction vein, and then the drinks are essentially have QR codes that then link from the drinks to the comic. So that gives us our fantasy world, that tells our story, and then in the comic, then we've got all the links to the various charities and organizations. I wanted to bring that into the real world, and how could I bring fantasy into the real world? And I did that through MMA and jiu-jitsu and the combat sports, which then sort of brought us back round to looking at drinks in the future, where we can look at energy and sports drinks that then go back into there. So the idea was essentially as having, as I said, a bigger brand that can hit a wider community. Reorg, for example, who you know quite well, Reorg is a charity that supports veterans and gives them memberships into jiu-jitsu clubs. Okay, cool. All right, what if proceeds from my drink that goes back into military associations and charities can go back to Reorg, and then we can see the results of Reorg by them putting these guys into gyms like ourselves. So it's a way of us also giving back to people like Reorg and everything else. So it's just fun, you know? It's like, I'm fucking 38, or 48, sorry.
Oh, yeah, that'd be nice, wouldn't it?
I know, that'd be mega, wouldn't it? I'm 48, writing comics with my mates.
Yeah. Do you illustrate? I mean, you have someone illustrate.
I've got
I know
an
you're
illustrator,
quite creative yourself as well.
Yeah, I've got an illustrator. So I come up with the premise. My brother-in-law then writes, who's X3 Power. He writes the stories because he's a proper comic geek. And then we get some artists. We've had a guy called Keith Burns, who's like a world famous artist. He did 2000 AD.
Oh, they're brilliant. Brilliant.
Punisher and shit like that. Commando comics, he did a lot of those. And then we got another lad called Phil Buckingham who does the illustration inside. We had Indian Motorcycles, which you saw at the bike shed, who, through Crazy Horse, built us a bike from the comic.
Yeah, class.
We've had a song written by Kinstrife called Groundhammer, which is based on the AC-130 gunship, which is where the namesake comes from. And then obviously we got the jiu-jitsu, where we've actually...
and a beer as well. Still a beer? Is it beer?
Yeah, so we got the beer and the cider. We had a bit of a delay on that, so we produced that originally. And now I've got an old school friend from the school that we mentioned earlier who's now come on board and looking to help produce the comic, the beer and the cider as well. So, yeah, it's just, I love what we do here, but I thought, how could I also just add to it? How could I bring a different layer to this? You know, but still keeping it in-house and then working with lots of other people. Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily as the most lucrative vocation or job.
It's part of the process, right?
But yeah, but that's not what it's about. You know, I've got a roof over my head. My kids are healthy. I've got a good missus. I mean, I'm happy, really. Do you know what I mean? So.
And for those listening, where can they find you and HR4K, mate?
So Facebook, Instagram. Instagram HR4K, Facebook HR4K, website www.hr4k.uk, and then Groundhammer. We've got 2 pages. We've got the training centre page, and we've also got the Groundhammer, which is the story and eventually the drinks page as well. And we're based in Hereford.
Awesome, mate. We'll be back for another event, as you know.
A
number of events, but it was pretty mega, mate. And those that have seen it.
Yeah.
And there's more to come, mate.
Shooting the shit, drinking beer, listening to music.
Mate, thank you, mate. Generally, mate, you are one of the most creative, visionary people. I think we've both chatted numerous times about it. Kind of, who knows where this is going to go for you in the next 5 years?
Yeah, I don't know.
I look forward to doing a bit more together, mate. It's been good.
We'll be watching a film in the cinema or something, going, "Oh, that's one of Ben's."
Yeah.
That's exciting.
Well, if it gets desperate, depends what cinema you go to.
Yeah, we'll star in it. He likes a film.
Yeah,
Awesome,
mega.
mate.
Hey,
cheers,
thanks,
Ben.
guys.
Thanks for your
Appreciate
time,
it.
mate, and the place.
Cheers, dude.
Cheers.